Hey guys, I wanted to make a short video with our introduction to Mark since we started this week, and it was super fun, and I did a 10-minute little introduction that I wanted to share with you in case you missed it. So we're going to jump in and we're going to be studying Mark this fall, and the goal is each week for us to have time where we read a text and we discuss it and we talk about questions and we try to find answers together. So as an introduction, I wanted to show you a few resources and then talk to you about a few key important facts that we want to know before we jump into the text. So the first resource I wanted to share with you is a study Bible. So whenever you are studying the Word, because we're reading a book the Bible has 66 books written by, I don't even remember, I think like 100 authors, and it is from a different time and was written in a different language. So having a study Bible is a great resource when you run into questions or things that you may not know from our current culture and experience today. So I use the ESV Study Bible, whichever translation you like, you can use. So what a study Bible is different theologians and pastors have come together and they've done the research for us of the original text or parallel verses, things like that, and they put them together for us in the study Bible. The nice thing is that you're getting a little bit of information on everything. If there are things you want to do deep dives into, we can talk about other resources for that later. So just to introduce you to an ESV Study Bible, what you'll see here is the text, and then down below there'll be notes based on the verse. So this is 2 Samuel 23, and then down here it says in 23:1, and it gives you a note. Maybe it's telling you what a word means or culturally what would have been happening at the time, but I love those notes. And then the second thing I want to point out is, especially when we're going through Mark, because in the Gospels, we're going to see a lot of Old Testament prophecies be fulfilled of things that were promised in the Old Testament that Jesus does when he comes in the New Testament. And so over here on this side are parallel verses that you can look up. And so in Mark, they're going to give us examples of, okay, this prophecy was fulfilled from Isaiah, and this is the text. And we can go look at that and find out more about, like, how cool is that our God gave prophecies and future truths that were going to happen, and then Jesus came and fulfilled them. So we're going to look at those together too. So that is the study Bible. The second one I wanted to show you that we're going to use together is a keyword study Bible. So as I said, the original Bible was written in Hebrew and Greek. The Old Testament was written in Hebrew. The New Testament was written in Greek. And what a keyword study Bible does is in the text, now I'm in 2 Chronicles, there'll be a word underlined like cleanse, and it will tell you a number. And you can flip to the back, and there's an entire New Testament and Old Testament dictionary. The Old Testament is going to tell you the root word in Hebrew, explain to you what that word originally meant, when it was used, and when it was used in other verses, all the times it was used in the Old Testament or New Testament. So that is another cool resource. And the resource that I'm going to read from you today is a book called What the Bible is All About. And this is one that's been used by lots of Bible teachers and is even endorsed. There's a foreword by Billy Graham. But I just got this, and I'm using it to do an overview of the book of Mark for us today. So now that we have our resources, what I want to talk about is just kind of a big overview, because I know not everybody has studied the Bible and knows, there's a lot of things about the Bible. So basically what I want to do is kind of introduce some things to you that maybe you know or maybe you don't. So like I said, the Bible is 66 books. It was actually written by 40 authors. I said 100. I was wrong. But I love what this book says as an introduction to the Bible. So I'm going to read it to you. It says, behind and beneath the Bible, above and beyond the Bible, is the God of the Bible. The Bible is God's written revelation of his will to humanity. Its central theme is salvation through Jesus Christ. So what's the central theme of the Bible? Salvation through Jesus Christ. And we're getting to see Jesus's life played out in Mark, which is going to be super fun. The Bible contains 66 books written by 40 authors, covering a period of approximately 1,600 years. The Old Testament was written mostly in Hebrew, a few short passages in Aramaic, and about 100 years or more before the Christian era. The entire Old Testament was translated into Greek later. And then remember, our English Bible is a translation from these original languages. And the other thing that I thought it said in here that was really interesting is it talks about what Old and New Testament means. So Testament means covenant. So the Old Testament talks about the covenant that God made, starting with, in Genesis and going all the way, the promises that he would make to his people. And then the New Covenants is how Jesus came, he fulfilled the old covenant, and now we have a new covenant with Christ. So that's Old Testament, New Testament, Greek, Hebrew, and then if we want to zoom in now, so that's big picture Bible. If we want to zoom in now to the Gospels. So the Gospels are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Matthew and John were both written by people who gave eyewitness accounts, things that they would have seen themselves during Jesus's life. Mark, the one that we're going to study together, Mark was a student of Peter. Peter was, after Jesus's death and resurrection, Peter was one of the beginning leaders of the church, and he would have been telling everybody the stories of what Jesus did whenever he was on earth. And one of his students wrote all those stories down. Peter was also an eyewitness to Jesus, and we're going to hear about Peter a lot in Mark. So what did I say? Matthew, Mark, Luke is the third one. Luke is the fourth one that I haven't discussed yet. Luke was our only Gentile writer in the New Testament, right? Yeah, he's the only Gentile writer. Luke was a doctor who became a student of Paul. So Luke wrote his with a very different look and perspective. And that's what's really cool is all 4 books were written with different perspectives. So then if we want to ask the questions who, what, when, and where, the last one, the entire story of Mark takes place in Israel, right? I think so. So if you can see here, and this is another reason why these, I'm second guessing myself because I'm also studying Exodus. So my brain is going back and forth between Exodus and Mark. Whenever you have a study Bible, and my study Bible has this as well, this is a map so you can kind of see where these things took place. So it took place in modern day Israel and Palestine. And you can see here, like here's the Mediterranean Sea, here's the Jordan River, Sea of Galilee, Dead Sea. You see where all of these things, a majority of what we're seeing is going to take place. Now, the what? So gospel means good news. And in the gospel, we're hearing the good news of Jesus through all 4 gospels. And there are 4, the way that the 4 different writers talk about each of the gospels is different. And so specifically with Mark, I think it's really cool that his goal is to show us the servanthood of Jesus, and also the fact that he was a servant, and also his power as our Messiah to save, because he comes in and we get to read all of the cool stories of the ways that he heals and delivers people in the book of Mark. So servant leader is our big thing that we get to see. So the intended audience of the Gospel of Mark is really interesting to me because I think this applies to us today. The intended audience of Mark was the Romans. So if you remember, during this time that the New Testament was written, the Romans were oppressing the Israelites. So Rome would have been the larger dominion, and there's lots of stories of the way that Rome mistreated the Israelites. So the fact that a book was written for the people who were oppressing them, that's Christ-like right there. I don't know that I could be writing that book if I'm being oppressed by a group of people. So the intended reader is the Romans. And I think this note in my, it's all about what the Bible is all about book said, and this is interesting. The Romans of Jesus's day were like average business people are today. They are not concerned about the genealogy of a king, but with a God who is able, a God who can do all things and meet all persons' every need. Mark is the business person's gospel. I think that's really applicable. Maybe Charlie did this on purpose. So understanding Mark. So the next thing we want to talk about is the who and the what. So we said Jesus's servant was a key, and then Jesus is our who that this whole book is about. But who wrote it? Mark. also goes by John Mark, like I mentioned, who would have been repeating the things that he heard from Peter. When was it written? It was probably written in the late 50s and early 60s, and we believe it was one of the first books written for the New Testament. So the purpose and summary, I thought this was interesting too, and again, this is me reading notes. Scholars generally agree that Mark wrote his gospel in Rome for the Gentile believers. So there are not a lot of Gentile believers at this time. When Jesus came, the gospel was then opened up to not only Jews, but also Gentiles, which is everybody else. Mark accounts for the ministry of Jesus from his baptism to his ascension into heaven. Most scholars agree that Mark's purpose was neither biographical nor historical, but theological, to present Jesus as the Christ, the mighty works rather than the great teacher. Hence, Mark makes fewer references to the parables and discourses of Jesus, but he meticulously records each of Jesus's healing and miracles. So my hope for this is that we can learn about who God is through our study of the book of Mark. When I study a text, I like to ask 3 questions, and we discussed these when we met together on Wednesday. The first question is, who is God? The second question is, who am I? And the third question is, so what? So when we read a text, we are getting information from that text. So in the text, who do we see God as, and what has to be true about him if the things in the text are true? And then if that's true, what does that have to do with me? So even the fact that Jesus was God's son, all-powerful son who was sent to earth, we see that servanthood already. That's the God we serve, is a God who's a servant. And he loved me enough to come and die for me. That's who I am. So what is the application part, right? The what we discuss in the group is how we take what we are learning and we apply it to our lives. And that's that so what. So my hope is that as we go through, we can get to know the God of the Bible better, and we can know better who we are based on scripture. So I hope you'll get to join us next week, and I hope you all have a blessed weekend. Bye.